saying
Okay,
that.
well, I'd like to officially welcome everyone to our student assembly. We have a very special guest with us today, Diamond Bar High School students and staff. This month of May is Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, and we are so honored to have a very special guest speak to us today. At this point, I would like to introduce our assistant principal, Elizabeth Chang, to introduce our guest speaker.
Hey, Brahmas out there. I'm so excited today that you guys were able to join us. We have over 300 students with us. We are so honored to be hosting today's assembly with someone who is a CEO and a co-founder of a community relief efforts organization. She has been working on humanitarian large-scale responses for over 20 years. And she, in the time of COVID-19, she has pivoted with our community needs and has really far reached into our needed areas with COVID testing and vaccination sites so that it can reach everybody in need. We are so honored to have her bridging with our community as well, just to share her story, her background, her AAPI heritage, as well as how you can impact in your future as well. So without further ado, I introduce Miss Ann Lee.
Hi, everyone. It's so awesome to be here. And thank you so much, Liz and Ruben, for inviting me, and Vishnu and Eunice for making sure that I was as prepared as possible. So I'm in awe of your students. I hear that they are extremely, extremely smart. So I'm excited for our discussion today.
So I'd like to introduce to you Eunice and Vishnu. They are part of our USE, what we call a United Student Body. And Eunice is in charge of our rallies and assemblies, and Vishnu Nair is our Attorney General. And they have spent some time collecting questions from our students. We have over 2,600 students on our campus, and they are interested in learning more about you.
So my name is Ann Lee, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of CORE. And CORE is a nonprofit organization. We first started out in Haiti in 2010 during the earthquake. And since then, in the last, I guess, 11 years, we've expanded outside of Haiti. We still have a presence there. And the majority of our response has been actually international, responding to a lot of hurricanes and earthquakes and other disasters, natural disasters. And then we started moving into the United States probably in about 2016, really along the Gulf, the Eastern Seaboard. And since then, we've been working sort of, internationally, nationally, but it was really during COVID when we jumped into the space to respond. We're not a health organization necessarily. We've done some things in cholera response after the earthquake in Haiti, but really we jumped into the space and increased testing, and then moved into vaccines, but also worked alongside our partners and our communities to provide other services like food, water, shelter, to make sure that those families were safe while testing positive in some cases. So we're a very multifaceted organization, and really in terms of the what of what we do is that we respond quickly. We respond on the ground within the community. It's really important for us to have a community-based response. We feel very strongly that communities are the ones that are survivors, and disasters hit these communities that are usually poor, that have experienced racism and inequalities for many, many, many years. And so it's really working through these community groups and communities that are survivors. They're strong and they know what is best for them and what they need and how they need it. So understanding that and working through those community institutions and personalities is really important to us, and we strengthen what they already have. Our idea is that we might be coming in with a little bit of extra expertise and some resources, but really we hire up locally and make sure that we have as much lasting impact as possible. And quite different from some other, the traditional humanitarian organizations, is that we strongly believe that it's not just about, bringing in a lot of resources and then walking away. because sometimes that can do a lot more harm than good. It's about doing things sort of looking at the longer term recovery lens and making sure that we strengthen those communities, not just for that moment, but for any future crisis that they might experience. So that's sort of the philosophy behind in terms of who we are, and that drives the what of what we do.
So as a woman leader at the forefront of CORE, have you ever dealt with race and gender related issues? If so, how have you managed and navigated yourself through the situation?
Yes, most definitely. You know, it's not easy being a woman of color in sector. Humanitarian assistance has historically been very white male driven, and it continues to be so. You see a lot of changes right now, which is different from nonprofit. Nonprofit, there's a lot of women in that sector, but in humanitarian response, there's a lot of white males driving that agenda. And doing this for about 20 years, it was quite difficult to kind of break into this space. I think what helped is having those key, I'll give you an example. My team was the Port-au-Prince office, the main capital office. And I happened to be outside of Port-au-Prince at the time, and I was trying to get back in. And my organization, which is a nonprofit organization, not the one we are at now, but a different one, wouldn't let me go back in, because they were too worried, because I was young, I was female, and they were worried about just how scary it might be. And so, you know, I held my ground and I sat down with them and said, look, you know, either you're not sending me because I'm a woman or I'm young, in which case it's discrimination, and I'm going to go down there whether you like it or not. And I'm going to go down there with or without the organization. They sent me on a plane the next day. So, you know, sometimes you have to stand firm and hold your ground.
Is there a difference you've seen in your agendas as an Asian American woman who was young when you started, in comparison to the more conventional, I guess, like you said, the more like the white male agenda for like from the people around you who are also doing like humanitarian projects?
I don't know if it's necessarily, you know, just being more sensitive to being told what you need and what you want. But I think that's where our perspective has really come from, you know, not coming from a, you know, colonial background of, you know, we know what you want, what's best for you, which is a very, you know, feels very colonial and a bit, you know, overbearing. So, you know, having a sense of, you know, listening to what's needed and having just ensuring that communities who are affected, who are such strong survivors, are able to have the dignity and the agency to make their own decisions on how they want to recover, I think does come from a space of being, you know, from a country where we've been colonized. So for me, it does have a direct correlation to my background. I never thought of that, Eunice, so that's very good. It's a interesting psychological analysis of where it comes from.
Just to take a slight turn and change in direction. So how do you think being an Asian American has affected the development of your soft skills growing up? And how did you cultivate your soft skills over time? And for those of our students that don't know what soft skills are, if you could explain that to them, that would be great.
Soft skills are so critically important. Soft skills are really like interpersonal knowledge and kind of the nuances in human behavior and understanding how to behave. It's like emotional intelligence, and it's probably the most critical piece to anyone's development. I can't tell you how important it is. I have hardly any hard skills. And so, you know, I think 99% of leadership and especially doing the work that we do here in terms of connecting these very disparate dots, you know, to make sure that you're kind of herding the cats into a goal and towards a direction, requires a huge amount of soft skills. You know, you got to get people to sing the same song and, you know, agree on something, even though they come from such different spaces and might even hate each other. And that is purely soft skills. So I think that, you know, being able to learn some emotional intelligence is really critical. You know, I grew up in a predominantly white neighborhood. And I think, understanding kind of constantly trying to figure out where you fit, where everyone else fits. You're so much more sensitive to those things, and also I think, growing up in a traditional Asian household, Korean household, and kind of like understanding the cues between like, a very different parental situation than what your friends experience. I mean, you basically have to learn not just like literally another language, right, to be able to communicate at home, but also like the cultural cues, behavioral cues, emotional cues that is very different from everyone around you and all your friends and all their households. So I think that gives us, as difficult as it may have felt growing up, being like, oh, I don't know where I fit in. Am I Asian? Am I American? What am I? And what language do I speak? Does my food stink? And all those things, it's like kind of getting more exercise emotionally and with your, emotional intelligence when you're younger than had I not had to experience that. And so for sure, it's been such a huge part of, being able to be much more clued into some of the soft skills.
Where did your passion to aid other nations such as Haiti, the Philippines, Congo originate? Because like you're not necessarily directly related to these countries, because like you just mentioned, you're a Korean American. That doesn't, you're not ethnically or background, like you're not related to them. So where did your passion to really help these nations come from?
Really is from my mom. She came out here to the United States and worked her butt off. Like she worked so hard. But at any moment in time, she did everything she could to help other people. And didn't matter what, whether they're Korean or not. She brought over her entire family. She had people come through the house all the time. And it was really sort of this value that she instilled in us, and that, even if you don't have much, whatever you do have, share it. Whatever assistance you can give to people, you do what you can. It's just even some time to talk to somebody, to make sure that they're okay. It can be, just something so small, but every single day she made an effort to kind of help everyone that she could, or anybody who needed assistance. I think from that, and then sort of growing up in a space where I was very sensitive to, the injustices, feeling and seeing as you grow up, Asian American, and when you stick out so much, and seeing people treat your parents like so poorly because they can't speak English, like those things, I was so sensitive as a kid, and it just made me so angry, and I think that those two things, like a positive and positive sense, like the value of, you help everyone that you can with whatever you've got. And then also just the frustration and like the anger that I feel in terms of seeing any injustice, and kind of mix those two things together. And that's what I think drives me every single day to do the work that I do.
So how have your degrees in urban planning, economics, and conflict management helped you in your field of work?
I mean, I don't regret getting degrees in those things, because the experience of going to graduate school was great. You learn how to learn things, right? In terms of like learning any hard skills, there was none, but there is definitely a space, I think, in terms of just knowing, sometimes when you get so focused in sort of one area, like when I was in Haiti, I was so focused on the urban planning piece to it. That's why when I left Haiti, I got an urban planning degree. But it kind of, going to school for those things, it kind of puts into perspective and makes you think sort of, here I was on the microcosm of my experience in Haiti, actually doing the work of urban planning. And then it kind of went into more of a theoretical space to kind of understand where it all kind of fits within the constellation, and, understanding that there is nothing new under the sun. There's a lot of information about things being tried out, and good ideas that are out there. And I think we often forget, especially in the humanitarian space, that there's so much pre-research you can do before going into a space. I think often you just drop down and you're like, okay, we're going to figure it out. No, You should be doing some research. You should understand the context of the country or wherever you go in, the culture, how the structure, the social structures are set up. What are the religious beliefs? Like, there's a huge amount of research that you should be doing. And I do think that my experience at school kind of really locked that in terms of how important, it's not just the operational piece going on the ground and like being tactile about how you figure things out, but there's a lot of brain work to be done beforehand.
Is there any other advice you would give for students preparing to go to college and perhaps pursue a career that you currently have?
There's a lot of ways to get into the space. The piece and experience is the biggest piece, right? So Peace Corps is an amazing way to do what I'm doing now. I didn't go, but a lot of the folk that I hire that are just phenomenal, like Dylan, and a number of our staff and a number of my colleagues, like our president, came from the Peace Corps. The experience is immeasurable. And it's not that, again, you're going into a disaster and responding. Like, Peace Corps basically has the philosophical space of you get embedded within a community, you get embedded within a family, and you learn the language fully, like you're fluent in that language. You understand them culturally. And then you kind of figure out, like, basically how to support them, whether it's like, if they're interested in teaching or learning English, then you teach them English, or building a well or a hospital, whatever it is. But it has that like very, ethnographically appropriate approach that I think is super important. Um, you know, Backgrounds, I was just actually talking about this with some of my colleagues last night in terms of how we got into the space. I have an investment banker right now who's running our operations in Los Angeles. And I asked him, how did you get into this? And he said, I had to call somebody named Peterson, and I was looking up his telephone number and Peace Corps popped up. So I just started clicking on that and I ended up at the Peace Corps. So it's sort of like, there's so many ways, again, Peace Corps is not just the only way, but whether it's to have some sort of, background in, like, you can be a logistician, a water sanitation specialist, a food specialist, a cash transfer specialist, or what have you. My whole thing in terms of in this space and finding good people is, again, going back to the soft skills space. It's like, you can always find people who are really good at that one thing, but it's really difficult to find one person who's really good at several different things. And the most critical piece to that is the management piece. And the only way you learn that is by not just focusing on school, and what classes you take and what's your perfect degree that is going to match, that pathway, but it's to be surrounded with people and things that make you feel very uncomfortable, things that you aren't familiar with, things that you don't like, ideas that you don't like. And even more so now because of the political space that we're in, it's really important to flex those soft skills, to be able to pivot, to be able to get along with people who are very different from you, to be able to figure out and navigate a context where you are the outsider. It goes back to being really good at just learning and being really good at learning people. And everything else kind of follows after that.
In this high school setting, like, what can we do to kind of surround ourselves with ideas and people that kind of make us uncomfortable and make us think like outside of our box?
I know that volunteering is not easy right now in COVID. It's not easy to, travel around, and maybe in terms of time frame, but even in terms of joining groups that are maybe doing webinars or chats and stuff like that, or like, what's that thing, that new thing, Clubhouse. Oh my God, I'm so old. But doing Clubhouse with, groups that you normally wouldn't connect with, in community groups that you're not familiar with. I think it's really easy for us to kind of be really comfortable within our own spaces. And so whether it's like, okay, learn about in, East LA, what is going on in, the Latin American community, the diaspora, and figure out if there's something that you can do to support. Find what your passion is that is piquing your interest, whether it's like, for me, I would be like, okay, what is where is the community that is really having difficulty in accessing vaccines, or who are not interested? Because that's what I'm interested in right now. And I would be like, okay, well, let me find out what community groups are out there doing the work. And maybe I can do something even from home to see what I can do to kind of support them. But they don't, they're going to be very different from me politically, maybe very outside from what my beliefs are. But still trying to see sort of where's that Venn diagram overlap of where it doesn't matter where you're coming from in terms of where your core beliefs are, but at least your objectives are the same in trying to, support people. Trying to find something as simple as like, you have a group of friends. And I remember this when I was in high school, I had a group of friends, and they were the only ones that I hung out with, only ones that I talked to. I would try to reach out and talk to somebody else, and, somebody that would normally not gel into my space or doesn't like the same music as me or what have you, and be, just, it's about really kind of learning how to interact with people. I think the number one thing that is so critically important in just like life is humor, and making people at ease and being able to open up, and in an authentic way, right? You're not trying to be like a weirdo spy trying to squeeze information out of people. But I think it's really coming from a place of real curiosity. Be curious about other people, be curious about other things that you're not familiar with. Learn another language, something that you wouldn't do. It's just about exercising those muscles that you have and not get stuck in the same thing with the same people and the same, just stuff that you're used to.
How do you manage to balance your stress and balance social emotional health with all of your work you have going on?
The most critical thing is your network. None of this stuff. I mean, I definitely don't do any of this by myself. All of the work that's been done is basically 99% everyone else. And so it's through your friends and network and people around you that kind of make you sane, not just physically. That's how I get a lot of my stress out, is, exercising and stuff, but also just emotionally. I talk to my friends a lot. Network, your social network, your family, all those things are for me, that's what's kept me so sane in the last crazy year and a half that's felt like 100 years.
Do you have any tips for anyone who's afraid of starting an organization or something similar to CORE? And then also, how did you build up your connections?
I mean, you never know what can happen. It's I feel like you might have this long goal ahead of you, and you take that first step, and then you're going to learn so much when you take that first step, and take the next step. So really, you don't know anything until you take that initial first step, and that's what guides everything. I think there's a paralysis of analysis that happens, right, where you get so overwhelmed with oh my God, there's so many other things I have to think about, and just all this and blah, blah, and all that stuff. It's just drown out that noise and just take that first step, whichever step that you can take. We brought bodies on the ground and said, we're just going to set up, and then let's see, and we'll learn as we go. I think that's the most critical piece in terms of doing anything. Just take that first step. Even if it's the wrong step, you'll learn and you'll pivot. I'm super chatty when it comes to the stuff that I love and I'm passionate about. I can geek out and really, really go on forever. And I'm really outgoing in this space. And I think in that sense, I've made a lot of connections through that passion, just being really authentic and being I'm obsessed with the stuff that I do. And people are very attracted to that. People know when you're authentic and really, really passionate about something, and they want to be part of that. And I think creating that attraction is really important to build that network. You have to, I think it's good to be strategic and that, right? But at the core of it, you have to be authentic, because people smell that from a mile away. I do, if somebody's trying to be so I think, if you find something that you really care about and you really love, and you're authentic about it, and you're honest to people of like, I need your help because this is something I really care about, and you have this thing that I need. People appreciate that a lot more. So be authentic, don't be afraid to reach out for help, but be very upfront about it as well.
I know how you said that your humanitarian work is a little bit different than nonprofit organizations. And so then where exactly does the funding that you guys raise to do all of these things in other nations come from? Because I feel like that's like money, like I don't want to say it, but it's the reality. Money makes things happen, And so I was just kind of curious.
And it's we're very lucky in that we get private funding. The majority of our money comes from private donations. That is the most flexible spending that you can get your hands on. Government spending is often very restrictive and very specific and pre-programmed. So it already tells you what you're going to do before you hit the ground, which is not conducive to sort of the approach that we have. So having that flexible spending is very important. So it's people like, you guys, your parents, your businesses, and, business people who give us the money to be able to do what we do.
How different is it serving other countries and then during this pandemic, really plugging into your home ground? Are there differences that you see?
Definitely, in the sense that, unlike other disasters here, I'm constantly worried, as my colleagues are, about our own families, our friends, and, you have that weight, and also kind of this surreal sense of, this is very, very personal. In that sense, it's quite different. In another sense, in terms of just the absolute lack of coordination and, information sharing between partners, and the struggles of operational rollout is very much the same. And it's in that sense, whether it's in Haiti or, a city in the United States, to, some of the places that we work, it's very similar. Humans are humans everywhere.
A student asked, where do you get your confidence? And I think that's something that's inspirational, because you have confidence that just comes as you're sharing. And so that would be a good one, I think, for the kids to hear that answer.
I remember when I was asked to take on a job, when I first took over as the director of Port-au-Prince in 2008, and I was quite young. I was barely 29. And I just said, like, I have no idea what I'm doing. This is like, I don't know how to do roads and build, bridges and create jobs. What are you talking about? Why would I do this? And he sat me down and he said, Anne, this is the biggest lesson you're going to learn. Nobody knows how to do anything. You just figure it out. You're smart, you get on the ground, and you just be confident. And so it's basically, initially, it really felt like the message was, and also Sean, my co-founder, also similarly after the earthquake, when we took on this huge thing together, I was like, how are we doing this? And he's like, I'm an actor. How would I know? I just fake it until I make it. And so I do think there's an element of that. It's, it can't be all fake, right? Like, yes, you do gotta fake it until you make it a little bit, but it has to be backed with some solid, just smarts, and that's not necessarily just book smarts, but that's also, again, the emotional smarts and the street smarts.
Was there a different feeling helping a pandemic where you're right there with diseases and such versus building water sources or food and homes?
Sense of urgency was more than anywhere else, and just the unknown factor of how bad it was or how easy it might be to spread was a huge factor. Again, in terms of being scared, I should have mentioned, in the beginning, when we didn't know how fast and easy it would be to spread COVID. I mean, our teams and we were all wearing like hazmat suits and, full on gloves. And, every day it would be like, I have no idea, one of us might get sick. What if somebody gets sick? What if they get really sick? What if we lose somebody? What if I get sick? What if I get my family sick? It's this constant thing of like, again, it's important to weigh those things. And it's not like you just take risks, right? You have to take calculated risks, and we try to mitigate from any, issues. And so we kind of veered on the side of being as cautious as possible, but at the same time, being able to still do the work, make sure that we still are on the ground, because, you know, that's the nature of what we're doing. And I think that, you know, for me, that was a huge eye opener. Just, you know, a lot of times being in the space and being like, oh, young people and, you know, millennials and stuff like that. But you know what? They stepped up. In this crisis, we had so many young people, without knowing how dangerous it was, not caring about that, saying, I need to do something to be part of this, to be part of the solution. And they came and they volunteered. Initially, we were just volunteers, and they came and they were on the line with us from day one.
And thank you again. This has been wonderful. And how about Anne, we give you the last word.
I just want to just say, like, how incredibly impressed I am by you all. And of course, Liz and Ruben, what you guys do is honestly like the work of God, really. And doing what you do is just inspirational. So I'm so happy to speak with your class, and happy to do it anytime, because I feel so strongly that for us to make a difference is to start as soon as possible in our youth, to really get a sense of the world and the impact we can make just within our own circles. So thank you.
Everyone, this will conclude our student assembly. Thank you again, everyone, for tuning in, and we'll say goodbye.
Thank you, Anne. Bye, Dylan.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, Dylan.
Bye, guys.